Sentinel Sports Central will be going over our next final prediction of this offseason, and it will be over the Kansas State Wildcats. And this is a team that was 8-5 in 2019, and they're an experienced team last season. That's what helped them a lot to be able to get up to 8 wins. But how will they do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're going to be going over your returning production along with a full preview and prediction on every game on Kansas State's schedule heading into 2020. So with that, let's look at your season trends from 2019 for this team. They were 5-2 between September and October. Then they were 3-3 between November and the postseason. So, once again, their overall record was 8-5 last season. I mean, they started off really well, and that kind of carried them all the way through the season. Of course, it was kind of bumpy once they got to November, but still, I mean, all around a great season for Kansas State. And yeah, some of your key wins from last season, they beat Mississippi State on the road, 31-24, good win there. They also had a huge win against Oklahoma, 48-41. That certainly was the signature win of the season for this team. I mean, it was kind of after that game is where, Kansas State definitely looked like a real team. And, once again, that was quite a win there to beat Oklahoma. I think it's been a while since they've done that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, man, yeah, that was quite a win there against Oklahoma on October 26th. They also beat Texas Tech on the road, 30-27 once again on the road on November 23rd. And then they beat Iowa State to finish off the regular season, 27-17. So still, just a great season for Kansas State. They had a couple of big wins. And once again, leading the pack would be Oklahoma and Iowa State. Both of those games were very good wins for this team in the end. As far as your returning production goes, you're returning your starting quarterback, Skylar Thompson, which is going to be huge for this team next season, especially considering they're losing a couple of major players other than him. But yeah, Skylar Thompson last season at 2,300 yards with 12 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He also had a 59% completion rate. So he does need to improve that completion rate if this team's ever going to make it to a Big 12 championship. But still, he had a decent season. His touchdown to interception ratio was really not all that bad. Once again, it just goes back to that completion percentage. He does need to improve that going into 2020. And his yardage was pretty good too. 2,300 yards, that's not bad at all. But in the end, once again, Skylar Thompson, he does need to improve quite a bit if this Kansas State team's going to get anywhere past 8 wins next season. They do lose their top running back, James Gilbert, which of course he was a good running back last season, 780 yards with 6 touchdowns. So he was not all that bad at all. So that's going to be a bad loss though, nonetheless. Losing a starting position in general is just going to be tough no matter who it is. But yeah, for James Gilbert putting up 780 yards last season, that is something to be somewhat concerned about at least. But the good thing is they do return their second running back in Harry Trotter, which he had just right around 270 yards last season with 3 touchdowns. So, overall, that's not all that bad in my opinion. But the good thing is that they can return a running back that was somewhat behind James Gilbert. They do lose their top receiver in Dalton Schoen. And, of course, Dalton was another big player for this team last season with 580 yards with 4 touchdowns. And they do return their second receiver in Malik Nowels. So that's going to be good that they can at least return their second receiver. And, of course, he put up 460 yards last season with 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, he's going to be a big help to this team. Expect him to be very important to Skylar Thompson next season. And, they also returned Joaquin Gill, which he had just right around 270 yards last season. And so in the end, kind of Phillip Brooks put up right around the same amount of stats with 270 yards, kind of similar to Joaquin Gill. So that's going to be big for Skylar Thompson to have all of them back. So honestly, this receiving core is looking pretty good for Kansas State next season. But I am a little bit concerned about that running back core with losing your top one in James Gilbert. But in the end, I think with Harry Trotter and still in that running back core, I think they'll be just fine. But in the end, once again, you still have to pay attention to the starting position losses. They do this throughout the offensive line. That also does concern me a bit. Off of most offensive lines, you see 1 to 2 losses. And for Kansas State, you've got 3. So that's going to be kind of tough to deal with that first, I'm sure. But as far as the defensive line goes, you lose 2 on there as well as one linebacker, and then you lose 2 in the secondary. So, yeah, this defense is losing 5 starters in total. So, honestly, 5 starters, that's going to be kind of tough to deal with as well. Typically you'll see 3 to 4 starters graduating or being out of the program going into the next season. And for Kansas State, they do have a bit above average as far as losses on the returning production goes. So, brings up the question, though, chances of improvement in 2020 for Kansas State. It's really tough to tell. I think if this team's going to improve next season, Skylar Thompson's going to need to take a big step up, and he's going to need to play much better in 2020 than he did in 2019 if this Kansas State team's going to be able to make it anywhere past a bowl game. I think Kansas State, honestly, this is a team that's got potential, but once again, they were pretty experienced last season. They're losing quite a bit of their returning production, so that's going to be kind of tough to deal with, I think, especially losing James Gilbert, and you can't forget about Dalton Schoen as well. So But yeah, in the end for Kansas State, it doesn't look all that bad in my opinion. But you just can't forget about those big players that you're going to be losing into the next season. Brings up another question: is Kansas State a Big 12 dark horse? And I kind of gone back and forth on that. Once again, it just goes back to Skylar Thompson. If he does improve next season, I think Kansas State easily could be a team that gets up to 7, 8, maybe even 9 wins. But I mean, until he does, or until he's able to do that, I mean, it's tough to say whether Kansas State can make it past where they were last season or not. But still, I mean, this is a team that I definitely think could sneak up on some people next season. They could possibly get a couple of big wins. And I mean, it wouldn't surprise me a single bit to see them get a couple of big wins over big teams. I mean, don't forget about Kansas State going into next season. I mean, because this team has been kind of sneaky over the past couple of years. Of course, they really snuck up on Oklahoma last year when they got a major win over them. So, yeah, you can't forget about that for sure. As far as your schedule looks, you start off the season on September 5th against Buffalo, and then you got North Dakota on the following week. And then you got Vanderbilt on the 19th, followed by West Virginia on the 26th, and that's going to be your first road game. So you do have your first 3 weeks of the season at home. Then on October 3rd, you got Texas at home, followed by Kansas, and then you got TCU and Iowa State on the road. Then in your November, you got some really tough games. You got Texas Tech to start off with, which that shouldn't be all that difficult. But your final 3 games are looking brutal right now, with Oklahoma being on the road on that first stretch of games. And then you got Oklahoma State, another team that I think should be great next season, followed by a trip to Baylor. So, those final 3 games of your season are going to be really tough. But overall, I mean, the first half of your schedule is not all that difficult in my opinion. I mean, at your September, I think you absolutely blow past your first 4 games. I think you get easy wins over all 4 of those teams. And I think Kansas State, honestly, could be going into your October ranked. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me a single bit because I expect them to kind of blow past all 4 of those games. So you go into your October 4-0. However, I do think you take a couple losses in your October. I mean, that Texas game I went back and forth on several times. I mean, because Kansas State really does not have all that tough of a stretch going into that game. And Texas, on the other hand, I mean, they're looking good, but nothing special next season. So I kind of considered giving Kansas State a win there, but I think Texas gets it in the end. I think Texas next season is a team with Sam Ehlinger that has potential to be a 10 or maybe even 11-win team. Who knows? I mean, that Texas team, I mean, they've already been super overhyped over the past couple of seasons, and I mean, they haven't really showed up. Like, especially last season, they were a disappointment. But could we see that in 2020 is the big question you got to ask. And Sam Ehlinger being an older quarterback, a more experienced one, you can't forget about him. So I think Texas gets the win there in the end. As far as October 10th goes, I think you blow past Kansas. And then you get a close win over TCU. Don't forget about TCU this season. That game's going to be on the road, so it's going to be tougher. But I think TCU in general has potential to be a bowl team next season. On the 29th, you got Iowa State on the road, and that's after a bye week. So overall, I mean, that doesn't look like all that tough of a game. But I think Iowa State gets the win there in the end. I think with it being in Ames, that's going to help them a ton going into that game. And same thing for Iowa State and Texas. I think Iowa State is a team that could get up to 8, maybe even 9 wins next season. I mean, I think they've got a ton of potential, so you can't forget about Iowa State there. And I just think they get the win there in the end. So you go into your November with a 6-2 record. You've already clinched bowl eligibility. It's just a matter of how far you can get past that. I think your November is going to be really tough. I think that you lose 3 of your last 4, and with those losses being to Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Baylor. I think you do blow past Texas Tech pretty easily, so you go into those final games with a 7-2 record looking pretty good. But I think those last 3 games are just going to be really tough for Kansas State. And, I mean, at that point in the season, I'm sure Oklahoma's going to be making a push for the college football playoffs, so they got to win every game. They're going to be super motivated, so they'll win that one. Then that Oklahoma State game, I went back and forth on, but I think coming off of that Oklahoma game, I think Kansas State may go into that game kind of fatigued, so I think Oklahoma State gets the win there in the end. And same thing with Oklahoma State. I think they're going to be right around the same skill level as, say, Texas or Iowa State next season. They're looking pretty good. Then that Baylor game to finish off the season. The main reason why I'm giving Kansas State a loss there is because it's on the road. That's just going to be a tough game to win on the road. So, yeah, I think your final record prediction for next season is going to be 7-5, which really is not all that bad considering the losing production that you do have. But in the end, I mean, you still make it to a pretty decent bowl game with the 7-5 record, so that is not all that terrible in the long run. But in the end, let me know your thoughts on Kansas State in the comments below. If you disagree with anything here, I'd like to hear your thoughts. But once again, thanks again for watching. And if you enjoyed this prediction video, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe as well. It really helps out the channel. I'd really appreciate that. But as always, thanks again for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for more from All Sports Central, and I will see you all later.